So when the chance to do Ant-Man came around, I jumped at the chance. Ant-Man was something that, you know, I'd come in with Marvel, and I'd known Kevin Feige from the time I was developing Fantastic Four. I'd also come in and pitched on Guardians of the Galaxy several years ago, and so I was on their radar. So when Ant-Man came about, I got the call, and I came in and met with Kevin, and you know, read the scripts and saw the materials, and I came sort of armed with my own attitude about Ant-Man. I knew the character inside and out, the Hank Pym version, the Scott Lang version, and you know, I definitely had feelings about those characters. I think when you grow up a comic book kid, you have your own personal relationship with those characters, and in the movie version, I had clear ideas about what I wanted to see, what I didn't want to see, and sort of how I would approach that character. So I think that was helpful. So in the movie version, I wanted to kind of bring out a Hank Pym that really had some gray areas. He's the mentor character in the movie, but he's kind of a screwed up mentor. And particularly because we had Michael Douglas playing Pym. And Michael, who is a movie star in the most literal sense of the word. I mean, he is just, he's it, man. I'm a huge Douglas fan. And he's made a career out of playing these characters who are really complicated and kind of morally ambiguous. So I really wanted to sort of tap into that. And the Hank Pym in the movie, you know, he is, again, he's a character who is like motivated by guilt. He's got definite issues with his daughter. He's got really ambivalent feelings about this thing that he's created, the Pym particle and the Ant-Man suit. So it's interesting to have kind of a mentor-pupil story where the mentor himself, he has some really mixed feelings about what he's doing. That's an interesting character, and I think a unique character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because, A, he's a father, and really his arc in the movie is all about, he's a pretty normal guy who's made terrible decisions in his life, and in the beginning of the movie we see him coming out of prison. And his biggest goal, his #1 goal, is to be a part of his daughter's life. And that's a really different arc for a character in the Marvel Universe, and one that I found really interesting. I also like that Scott Lang is a hero who doesn't have any superpowers at all. It's all about the suit. And particularly with Paul Rudd playing Scott Lang, we have a lot of fun with the idea of like, what would you do if you found the suit? What would I do? Well, that's kind of probably what Paul Rudd is going to do, or what his attitude about it would be. So he's really the eyes and ears of the audience in this adventure. And it kind of, the movie I think is also different than other Marvel movies in that, like, as I said, he's a normal guy, and through a set of circumstances, he comes into contact with this suit and gets sort of pulled into a Marvel world, you know? There's a world out there he had no idea existed, and things going on he had no idea about, and now he is sucked right into the middle of that and becomes a central part in trying to sort of, you know, help Hank Pym out with this massive issue that he has. Scott Lang in the movie, you know, he's a very smart guy. He's got a master's in electrical engineering. He's got definite skills as a cat burglar. You know, he at a certain point in his life made some bad decisions and has paid for them. He's done a 3-year stint in prison. And as we see him at the beginning of the movie, he's getting out and he's determined to make a new life for himself. He's just going to go on the straight and the up and have a relationship with his daughter and be a good guy. But it's a tough world out there, you know, and there are these temptations that come at him. And so part of it is this battle for his sort of moral compass, you know. It's a story of a guy, and you're watching him go through life and sort of get back out in the real world, and you're rooting for him to make the right decisions. And part of the movie really is about him getting in touch with his better self. Well, I think it's important when you start any movie that everyone on board, behind the camera and in front of the camera, have a clear sense of what the tone of the movie is. And a movie like Ant-Man, it's tricky because there are a lot of things going on. I mean, it's definitely a superhero movie. It's got a strong science fiction concept, you know, with the shrinking and controlling ants. It's got the structure of a heist movie. It's got these dual sort of father-daughter redemption stories going on. But really, tonally, the thing that's holding it all together is it really has the beat of a comedy. Like the movements and sort of the tone of it, it's comedic. We're not laughing at Ant-Man, but we're definitely acknowledging the absurdity of, you know, this character and his powers and being able to shrink. And it's something that you can have a very clear idea of what the tone is, but you got to be able to communicate that tone to everybody involved. Paul Rudd is like an insurance policy. He's like a really charismatic insurance policy. And by that I mean, if I'd come into Ant-Man without Paul Rudd in that role, it would have been a little tricky, because Ant-Man tonally is a very specific thing. It's different than any other movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And part of that is the hero himself. You know, it's people usually aren't familiar. You know, the average person is not necessarily familiar with Ant-Man in the comics, so there are these questions of, what does he do? What's the tone of the movie? And I think Paul sort of clarifies that a lot. And one of the great things about Paul is he's mostly known now for his comedic roles, and people forget what an incredible dramatic actor he is. So for me, it was important in the beginning of the movie, when we see Paul in prison before he gets out, to present sort of a more rugged looking Paul Rudd. And Paul got in amazing shape for the movie, you know, and we present him as this guy who can, at least for a little while, hold his own, you know, in a prison fight. But we also like the idea, you know, of Indiana Jones, like a guy who, you know, gets pummeled but comes back for more. He's a very scrappy character. But Paul just, you know, he is my favorite kind of actor. You know, he's smart. He comes incredibly prepared, but the preparation also means that he's willing to throw all of that out and come up with something absolutely new. Also, the fact that Paul's one of the writers on the movie was great, because he was not only concerned with the character of Scott Lang and about how many lines do I have, whatever. No, I should say this, not you. He's not that guy at all. He gets the story, the larger story, you know, the arc of all the characters and the tone of the whole thing. So that was incredibly valuable.